Professor Patti, and I'm reading assigned course materials here. We're going to start Chapter 1, Part 1, Page 1, on Mark S. Holman, Promoting Community Change. So if you're a community organizer and you're taking advanced generalist coursework and you have another textbook, boy, I'd love to hear about it because they are tough to find. This advanced generalist coursework is required for 626, which I teach in Springs at Cleveland State University. Super helpful, lots of resources, available in print, so many things going for it. Part 1, Responding to the Need for Community Change. Norman Karpenfussen didn't know how much longer he could put up with this insubordination. What a sentence. He could remember word for word the warnings issued to his staff in the last. If anyone were to question his memory, he could pull the memos from the file and show them. In fact, everything that issued forth from his office was copied and placed in a file. Norman liked everything in its place. Norman liked order and orders. The sounds coming from the agency conference room right next door to his office flouted these very notions, and Norman could feel the anger rising up in him. Norman allowed himself a shrewd little smile as he recalled the words of his last memo. Quote, "No member of the health clinic staff, including volunteers, is authorized to speak to private citizens regarding the alleged matter of contamination of groundwater in the vicinity. Such action is not under the purview," he particularly liked that word, "of this agency and is an unwarranted exacerbation," he liked that one too, "of an increasingly volatile situation. Any staff member ignoring this admonition will be dealt with in accordance with the full measure of the administrator's authority." He loved that one. End quote. Ooh. His smile quickly faded as the scraping of chairs in the adjoining room brought him once again to the realization that preparations for a community meeting were underway. A meeting organized by the clinic staff. How could this have happened? The staff used to be so docile, so afraid of his authority, so afraid of him that they almost apologized when suggesting any new direction for the agency. He knew that the people in the surrounding community were poor, uneducated immigrants, if indeed they were legal at all, and they needed to be treated carefully lest their fears get the better of them. His staff had seemed to think so too. Now this, his staff stirring up trouble, organizing the community to protest the city's supposed cover-up of groundwater contamination, raising fears of dangers to community health. This was not their job. Didn't they know that? The neighborhood health clinic's purpose was to treat sick people, refer to other programs in the community, and maybe do a little counseling. They were certainly not supposed to be agitators. Norman realized he would have to go next door and put a stop to all this nonsense. Page 2. As Norman opened the door, he was greeted by Grace Marquez, the director of volunteers who seemed to be running the show. "Welcome, Mr. Karpenfussen," she said with a smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," she continued, "this is Mr. Karpenfussen, our executive director, who's come to join us. Maybe he can explain the clinic's role in helping you to get your groundwater cleaned up." Then Mrs. Gaxiola, a longtime clinic volunteer, chimed in. "Señoras y señores, les presento el señor Karpenfussen." Now what am I going to do? Norman wondered. Part 1 introduces you to the idea of promoting community change, the idea that you do not have to contribute to the presence of problems by inattention and inaction. I believe you should look at, not look away from, problems that go beyond the individual and be willing to confront those problems with the knowledge and skills at your disposal. You cannot take sole responsibility for the problems you see, nor can you tackle them all, but you can make a conscious decision to help change policy and improve conditions that affect the lives of people in your community. Further, you have the opportunity to bring people together to discover the personal gifts and other community assets that may lie hidden from view. With community members, you can figure out how to use these resources to strengthen the community, even build on what's working, and improve the lives of its individual members. It is important to acknowledge this as a legitimate, if not fundamental, part of your role as a social worker, public health worker, community psychologist, or human services professional. As in any significant aspect of your life, being a community change agent requires a sense of conviction and balance. This is not to be confused with being devoid of passion. Far from it. Your strong feelings that the rights of people you serve be acknowledged and fully granted provide a necessary fuel to your involvement. A spirit of principle should infuse your actions, but your passion should not substitute for purpose. 4 chapters make up part 1. In chapter 1, Understanding the Challenge to Change, I provide an overview, that's Holman, of the enterprise of community change. You will glimpse the range of community conditions you may confront as a professional working in the human services field. Together, we will reflect on the pursuit of social justice as a vital calling for those who enter this field of work and explore some of the fundamental issues involved in working to promote change, including the critical importance of recognizing the diversity of cultures. This discussion will help you see the community itself, not just its individual members, as a client, and I describe a number of ways your work can help improve your community. We will even examine the word client to help you understand that your relationship with people is one of partnership, not dependency. Finally, I discuss the value of idealism as a source of strength and clarity for your work. In Chapter 2, Theoretical Frameworks for Community Change, I present the theoretical principles that provide a structure for understanding how you can promote action to change conditions that affect people. Having a strong theoretical base for your actions will help you to interpret what is occurring and gauge what is likely to occur from the actions you take. A number of foundation theoretical frameworks, along with cornerstones of community building, will guide your understanding. We examine the elements that contribute to a healthy community and the circumstances that must be present for change to occur. It is the wealth of communities that we use to promote change and build community strength. You will go beyond an understanding of wealth as only money, recognizing 9 different forms of community wealth or capital. You will learn how forms of oppression contribute to many of the problems we need to face and the fundamental matter of working to secure human rights. You will come to value people as beings who transform the world, not just adapt to it. In every situation, something is going well or has gone well, and you will learn to use the spirit and insight of appreciative inquiry as a powerful tool for change. Several models of community change are described, which will acquaint you with a variety of different approaches. Your ability to recognize and develop the assets available in the community and your belief that the members of the community are the most important contributors to actions and decisions will influence everything you do. All right, so that's just the first few pages of Holman, and we already have a fire struck, right? They have a lovely example of, it feels very Aaron Brockovich to me, of a clinic owner saying, this is not our problem. And if you are working in human services field already, you might understand and hear that. And the clinic director had wonderful points. His points were, these are the 3 things we're funded to do. So when you are working for a community organization, there are finite resources, as there should be. There's finite resources in every community. And so your community has said, here's how much we give to you. And your administrator's job is to administer those grants. And perhaps some of you will be moving into that role of Mr. Karpfussen. Perhaps some of you are already there and are coming back from your MSW because you'd like to supervise more clinical staff or do some more clinical staff. We certainly have those kinds of students who come through MSW program every year. So the first 2 portions of this course, we are talking about wealth, defining wealth, and giving and understanding to people the valuable contributions that we can get in kind or without cost, and we can count in kind donations on our balance sheet for funders. So I know that you all will be doing you will be doing logic models in other classes. We'll be bringing logic models in. You'll be doing some interviewing in this class. That's going to be really my focus, is having you guys pick up the phone and tie into that community wealth in this course. So we get right into it before we even start talking about chapter 3. How exciting is that? Blazing ahead. Let's take a sip. If you're going to read, black coffee and soda water. They are your friends. Chapter 3, relating community change to professional practice, focuses on the role community change plays in professional practice. Perhaps you aren't sure how community change fits your picture of what people in the human services professions do. This is a common and legitimate reservation. Many workers are not striving very visibly for community change, so it's hard to recognize its function. To help explore this issue, we examine the basic purposes of social welfare, surveying traditional approaches used by human service professionals, and relating community change activities to professional values. This is a time to consider your own professional identity. I encourage you to look at the difference between a more common service approach and one that builds on and develops combined strength to make a sustained difference in community functioning. I invite you to question professional tolerance for conditions that not only harm clients, but also restrict the extent and quality of professional practices themselves. I also ask you to think about the connection you will make as a professional between what you think and what you do. Your professional preparation gives you the theoretical framework and practical skills you can put to use in the context of community change. You can start off well equipped for this kind of work. In Chapter 4, Putting Yourself in the Picture, the focus is on you as a change agent. Much of the writing in the field of community change talks about community change agents, almost as if we were talking about a group of people it would be nice to know about, but not become. I take a different approach and speak directly to you as an individual who will be involved in the business of promoting community change and recognize many opportunities for doing so. I encourage you to develop the habit of reflective practice to promote your self-awareness and elevate your effectiveness. Everyday matters with which you must contend as a worker engaged in community change are examined. How do you get your boss to go along with your change efforts? How do you fit activism in with other aspects of your job? How do you avoid becoming burned out? Finally, I discuss the value of some simple, down-to-earth tips that will increase your effectiveness. Working to promote community change is an exciting endeavor that will energize you and make your decision to become a professional in the field of human services more meaningful. Many of the changes you make seem small or relatively minor, but you will see them grow over time into meaningful improvements. Perhaps you will even initiate actions that substantially alter the balance of power in your community, producing significant, permanent change. You have the ability to help eliminate problems rather than contribute to their maintenance. Recognize the strengths in your community, your own and others, and using them to build a better future. I invite you to consider these opportunities more fully in the following pages. Chapter 1, Understanding the Challenge to Change. I'm not reading the chapter highlights. You got to buy the book for that. There are really great chapter highlights, and there's great lists in here. If you're taking my course a little later on, I ask you to include lists from this textbook in your questions that you're going to be doing when you're interviewing people. What's going on out there? Beginning in the 1930s, through his death in 1972, Saul Alinsky upset the comfortable status quo of the haves in many social communities through his action organizing of the have-nots. He was the founder of the Industrial Areas Foundation, IAF, which trains organizers and builds organizations whose primary purpose is power and whose chief product is social change. So those of you who are looking to do advanced generalist work on a larger area, I think of it Amnesty International because of my passion projects, but IAF is another organization if you're really interested in large-scale policy work. Some time back, Saul Alinsky from IAF made these observations on social workers. I'm cringing. Can't wait to hear what this man thinks about social workers. Okay, yeah, don't like it. Please remember that social work is primarily a female profession versus psychology and versus other social sciences. And we have a large proportion of African American women. It's our largest raising demographic of masters. So I always view what men have to say about social workers, I won't even say with a grain of salt, with a tub of salt. All right. They come to the people of the slums not to help them rebel and fight their way out of the muck. Most social work does not even teach. Taking it, please take social policy. I'm pretty sure it's a prerequisite, but social work was started in the slums because other people wouldn't go there. And it was a strengths-focused movement in the slums that persisted through Prohibition when no one else would go in and observe change. Housing laws, tenement laws exist because of social workers. So F you, buddy. Also, quoted in 1945. And if we look at most casework, more than 75% of casework is not evidence-based. And what we do as caseworkers, as human service workers, as the Department of Children's Services and Health and Human Services, which is not social work, what people do there with direct aid is tertiary, it is downstream, and it is literally a Band-Aid. And that is not social work. That's direct government aid, just FYI. Okay. You were confused about the profession you're getting into. Strong words, aren't they? They're supposed to be. How do they apply to the way you will provide human services? Will you address only the singular problems of individuals, or will you stand back from time to time and bring into focus the larger picture these individual images combine to form? Will you look beyond the immediate situation to understand the fundamental barriers your clients face? Will you shake your head and wring your hands, or will you do something about it? What kind of human services worker do you intend to be? You will come to realize that a variety of forces outside your office contribute to the problems of people bring to your office. Paying attention to those outside forces may improve the lives of the people you see every day in your agencies more than the individual service you offer there. Maybe some of these people wouldn't have come to you at all had you addressed those outside forces directly. What you will see if you look. You may find it hard to ignore the call to social justice in action if you are willing to open your eyes and your ears. In 2010, the serious violent crime victimization rate for persons with disability was 16 per 1,000 per person. 2,857 high school students drop out, one student every 8 seconds during a school day. Statistically, most likely to happen during the freshman year, which is why if you're a school social worker in high schools, you see there's a lot of freshman-only programming. That's exactly why, because they don't know what they're doing. They just know they're dropping out that year. All right. 16,244 public school students are suspended every day in America. One student every second and a half of every school day. Every day this occurs. Every day. Are those conditions you find acceptable? I'm, again, reading this book to my social work students. I don't think that you find those conditions acceptable. I don't. But we have to understand that these conditions are occurring because of the society they're happening in. You are not going to fix this with a school lunch. Otherwise, it would be fixed with a school lunch. Understand that these figures may understate the real measure of poverty. This federal poverty level developed in 1950s is based on a belief that a family spends 1/3 of its income on food. Things have changed quite a bit since then. A newer measure, the self-sufficiency standard, developed by Dinah Pierce, more adequately reflects socioeconomic conditions, acknowledging current spending needs, various family configurations, regional differences, and a host of other factors. Although this standard is a more accurate measure, providing a more honest, clear picture of poverty may not be politically feasible. And they cite Mukhopadhyay, Shingler, Atler, and Findace, 2011. There are two people who read a finished article. I don't know why there's balloons. There's two people who read a finished article. The publisher and the author's mother. And there's 4 authors here, so that means 5 people read this article. Okay, in 2011, they said providing a more accurate, clear picture of poverty may not be politically feasible. Income inequality keeps us a nation apart. 40% of Americans receive less than 12% of the nation's income. And the top 20% receive more than half of all the income, more than all the lower 80% combined. One author here with 2 last names. Donavis, Walt, et al., which means there's a bunch. It means there's more than 4 other. Okay, 80%, the lower 80% of Americans receive less than half the income. That's totally believable. That's feasible, right? All right. A few Americans, just 5%, take in more than 1/5 of all the income. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities report concludes that in the last 3 decades, after-tax incomes of the richest families climbed substantially, while the incomes of the middle and low-income families saw only modest increases. This is in the USA, 2013, Stone, Tracy, Sherman, and Chen. From the late 1940s until the late 1970s, prosperity among all income groups grew about the same pace. Then things changed. From 1979 to 2010, the average income of the top 1% was 4 to 5 times greater than the middle 60% and the bottom 5th. Carter? That sounds like Carter, 1979. Remember, the top 1% had a lot of money to begin with, so their incomes really grew dramatically during this time. Stone et al., 2013. Is this a condition you find acceptable? Okay. When the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, if you see HHS, that's the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 2005, examined the health and well-being of children, it found that social and economic factors have a noticeable effect on children's health. Not only are the children directly affected, but the physical and mental health of children can affect the family as a whole. Low-income children are more likely to be in poorer health and are twice as likely to have socio-emotional difficulties. They are more likely to live in neighborhoods that do not feel safe or supported, and they miss more days of school. Moreover, the physical and emotional health of a child's mother affects how that mother cares for the children and has an impact on the health and well-being of the whole family. Newsflash, it affects the health of all caregivers. And children identify with up to three caregivers before age 3 as primary caregiver, or before age 5. Kids 5 and under, the mental health, the addiction status of all 3 of those primary caregivers will impact them, FYI. That's cite Professor Patti. So we need to support dad's mental health and grandparents' mental health and auntie's mental health and everyone. Mothers in low-income families, parents in low-income families, and mothers are much less likely than mothers in higher-income families to be in excellent or very good physical and mental health themselves. Furthermore, higher levels of parenting aggravation are more likely in low-income families. The report from the Department of Health and Human Services thanked them for this groundbreaking research. The report notes that these circumstances may combine to put children in low-income families at a health, developmental, and educational advantage. That's a quote from page 5. At the end of 2013, almost 11 million workers were out of a job. Like, these are all the things that you all know and probably why you are spending so much money on a master's program right now. Okay. So many pages this chapter. We're only on page 3, and I feel like I need an Ativan. I'm on page 28, 29, 31. We're just going to keep going. Who cares? Okay. At the end of 2013, almost 11 million workers were out of a job, with more than 4 million long-term unemployed. People of color were particularly affected. The unemployment rate for Hispanic workers was 1.5 times that of white workers. Black workers fared even worse, with an unemployment rate twice that of white workers. Bureau of Labor Statistics, 2013. A father's involuntary job loss increases the likelihood that children will repeat a grade or be suspended or expelled from school. Khalil and Zielgest, 2008. With parental job loss, middle-class children are less likely to obtain any post-secondary education, and the effect for Black children is 4 times as strong. Any children are less likely, and then for Black children, it's 4 times. From Khalil and Whiteman, 2009. One event can set in motion a host of other long-term consequences. This at a time when the stock market grew faster than it had in 15 years and set an all-time high. This at a time when after-tax corporate profits were at an all-time high. Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, 2013. Hungerford, 2013. U.S. Department of Commerce, 2013. What's it like to be hungry? After completing more than 52,000 in-person interviews and reviewing responses to more than 31,000 questionnaires from member agencies, researchers from Second Harvest, now called Feeding America, the nation's largest organization of emergency food providers, discovered these compelling facts. 42% of clients choose between paying for food, utilities, or heating fuel. 35% must decide between paying for food, rent, or a mortgage. And 32% face a choice between paying for food and medicine and medical care. Cohen, Kim, and Oles, 2006. Now, Feeding America and these 3 researchers, 2006. This is daunting, right? This is daunting data, but these are policy researchers. These are people who put in a lot of citations and grant applications, federal grant applications, local private grant applications, to be able to pay someone to sit and make phone calls or sit at food centers or sit at grocery stores and survey people. So when you guys are thinking about what is the scope of my problem, these facts in this text are something you can cite, and you can do a reverse lookup and go to our online library and look up if you are talking about a meal program, or if you'd like to include meals in your community setup. Maybe you're going to be doing something in your communities where you're having a town meeting and you want people to come, or maybe you want people to come and practice math homework, or you want people to come and talk about one of the numbered issues on your ballot, like issue 4 is coming up. And what does that mean for our Bel Air Puritas neighborhood? Well, what do you want there? Food. How do you fund it? You write the grant that says a lot of these families that we have are middle class, and we know that our middle class families their food expenses are going up. So we would like to be able to cater in Chipotle, like self-serve Chipotle, so that people don't have to choose between making dinner for their family or spending bus fare on getting here. So 30 minutes in. I do want to read this book. I'm going to put my little place marker. We're going to read 30 minutes at a time. I'm going to give you some context clues of what's going on in this textbook. Oh, I got further than I thought. I am on page 6. Continue blazing ahead on chapter 1. We'll have some introductory assignments due this week, and I will see you guys on the other side of page 6.